Hey y'all, C.W. Harper here, and today I'm going to be reading from a book called The Merge. This is one right here. Awesome cover, kind of steampunky. Love it. The cover was done by Roots, Rudz. Very talented artist. It is by Jesse Bond and C.K. Timber. They're a mother daughter team that published through Oracle Book Art Publishing. And The Merge is a post apocalyptic time travel adventure between unlikely friends. Earth's been decimated. Living in the desolate aftermath required cunning and bravery, and even then it may not be enough. Danger could lurk from any place and at any time. For Oma, that always meant run. When faced with a fight, Oma can't hope to win. She's saved by an extraordinary creature, a foreigner, a monster. Prepare yourself to take an adventure through the merge and time. While Oma discovers trust, hope, and a threat to everything she's ever known, secrets, battles, and an amazing new world awaits as the pair explore every means necessary to change the future for all. All right, I'm going to start with chapter 1. And today's video may be a little bit longer than usual because this is a longer chapter. Clink, tink, click, tick, tick, clink. The little tin hammer worked, slowly shaping the metal into something less resembling a glowing blob and more into something magical. It wasn't the bang and hiss of forging a blade, nor was it the shaping large hunks of steel into machinery. Each fall of the hammer was painstakingly precise, delicate work, to make something extraordinary. He lifted his goggles, wiping the sweat from his brow. It wasn't hot, it was scorching. He would endure. The final masterpiece would be a gift for the heart of his life, for the little girl he'd raised into a young woman. One of remembrance and protection, because he knew their time left was precarious. At any moment, their little haven could be overrun, and when that happened, he could only hope she would survive. And he'd done enough to make her ready. Repositioning his goggles, he picked up the hammer. She was all he had left besides his kiln. He was determined that when the fires burned to ash and his bones turned to dust, it was she who would be saved. 8 years later. Clasping the bronze torque hanging loosely around her neck, Oma looked to the skies. She couldn't remember how long she'd been running, and with cloud cover still blanketing the blue haze above, it was likely to be another long night ahead of her. She kicked the dirt off her brown pack and scrunched her nose as the dust threatened to make her sneeze. The soil was the same color as her shoes and clothes, her whole life for that matter. Sighing deeply, Oma pulled her dad's goggles on from where they perched on top of her head. She hefted the cumbersome bundle onto her back with a grunt, jostling it into its uncomfortable but secure position. One step. I will make it if I just keep taking one step. Oma entered the ruined old world city weeks earlier after a brutal run from twisted creatures who'd caught her scent. Blasted mutants. Sorry, my allergies are still acting up. Sifting through the desecrated building, she looked for anything she could find that would fit into her pack. Little was left to find. Other survivors of the final war ransacked the place long before Oma had her shot at it. But that didn't mean she wouldn't still try. To stop would be to give up, and that wasn't Oma. She was a fighter. She was a survivor. The combined power of First World weaponry decimated most habitable places on the planet. Most of the natural life on Earth was destroyed long ago, leaving it filled with other, worse things. Small towns remained scattered around the planet, and she knew of a few in the lowlands. Walking beyond the outskirts of the once bustling suburbs, she made her way past broken, upheaved machinery. Scattered bits of white shone stark against the dusty ground. 2. The remnants of bones became a sight more common than she cared to admit. They provided the only evidence of those who perished before her and were a disturbing reminder of what could be. Most were incinerated in the chaos of the war, but some of Earth's population survived. Oma's parents descended from them, though she was raised only by her father. On most days, she wasn't sure if the fact she was alive was a blessing or a curse. Not that she would ever give up. To prove it, she was on the move again, one step in front of the ever loving other. The wanderers were soon converging on the city of Orleans. They came from the west earlier that day, and Homa needed to make her escape. Staying in one spot for too long was never a good idea, especially with one such as them, hunting down anybody they could put their hands on. Wanderers would take whatever they wanted from Orleans. It was, after all, only a meager supply settlement on the outskirts of the old world city. Alma wouldn't be there when they arrived. The deformed hominids traveled from community to community, preying upon the weakest through raiding and pillaging. She had heard oftentimes they stole away people too. Alma would never allow herself to be caught, though. No, she had one step out the door at every turn, and she would keep it that way. Even with the persistent cloud cover, the muggy heat blasted down at her skin, leaving it sticky. Alma hated the ever-pressing feeling of thick air that filled her lungs to capacity. She knew, however, life probably wasn't much better elsewhere in what was left of this miserable world. Some places remained so brutally cold one could freeze in minutes. In others, thick, toxic pollution made the air poison to breathe. The world had become anything but forgiving. Everything she scavenged over the past 2 weeks she stuck inside her pack, trading it that morning in Orleans for enough food to survive on until she could hunt. In addition, she needed trinkets to make her traps. The real trouble, though, was in the weeping trees and dense shrubs one could find food, except the gnarled branches and deep darkness made anyone as much the hunted as the hunter. Orleans proved to be one of the lucky settlements. Ravaged to crumbling ruin during the final war, the outskirts of the old world city persevered. Alma needed supplies to make it in the waste, and that drew her to Orleans. Clothing didn't sew itself, blades didn't forge themselves, and food didn't grow in the radiated wasteland without some serious help. The people in the coastal city took up fishing, but that turned out to be even more dangerous than hunting in the forest. Bigger creatures lived in the deep than what dwelt in the woods. Alma wished to know the world as it once was. She dreamed of seeing it through her own eyes and not as a tale she heard from passing travelers. She wanted to experience the world of monstrous technology and to know a time of plenty. It took energy to run the few old world machines still in service, and unfortunately the wanderers were the ones who figured out how to power them. Looking back the way she came, Alma scanned her surroundings and breathed a sigh of relief. Nothing appeared to approach on the horizon. She didn't fancy herself being captured by the crazy, twisted beings and forced to work in servitude to them. No matter, she was mechanically inclined and good at working with her hands. Working a trade for someone else wasn't the same as forced manual labor. She never wanted to experience something like that. With that thought pressing in on her, Alma quickened her pace. The wanderers weren't the only dangers in the world. Monsters, creatures from the Merge, and dark angels existed. She'd heard of terrifying and deadly creatures more fearsome than those lingering in her darkest nightmares. Enslavement by wanderers frightened her, but capture by one of those creatures, or worse, to be dragged off to some foreign place past the Merge, terrified her even more. Alma shivered at the thought. The final war brought with its destruction many changes to the world that were vast and well beyond her knowledge. Each morning she wondered what new savagery the day would bring. Would it be monsters, dark angels, or some other kind of creature? Baddies that came from an alternate existence, or humans who became twisted, mindless beasts? It could be any number of possibilities with the Merge. A rift between two worlds opened when cataclysmic bombs fell at the end of the final war. Explosions ripped Earth apart, another world collided with it, and outpoured the creatures of nightmares. People believed that anyway about the Merge. Prickles ran down Alma's spine. She hated thinking about all the nasties in the dark, but ignoring them and ending up a demon's meal would be worse. Dark angels scared her the most. The thought of huge teeth and claws embodied a terror Alma couldn't quite shake. Then again, Alma had no intention to ever meet one. Deep down, she cared little where the abominations came from or by what name they went. She only knew she must avoid anything and everything to survive. Her dad made that much clear. He told her to stay far away from the denizens of this world and she would live another day. His advice kept her always on the move, trusting nobody, always looking out for only herself. That approach, however, created a problem. It was a lonely existence, even if it was one she resigned herself to live. The establishment faded in the distance as she headed toward her evening destination. Ahead of her, the land opened to barren fields and places filled with shadows and twisted foliage. Oma needed a plan for the night. First, she would head into the boggy swamps to set traps. So long as she didn't venture too far, she'd be away from the other scavengers. She passed by the sign, a landmark she liked to use. Half destroyed, it read Orlean. Seeing the sign told her she was near the turnoff she'd take into the swamplands. It would still be a long trek. Oma was healthy and fit, making the journey between different settlements and hamlets was second nature to her, so she had no idle time to become lazy. She could travel distances at a decent pace, even though she was forced to keep up her guard. The worst part of the trip came when she needed to venture into the swamps like she would that night. The ground, spongy and soggy underfoot, made every step sink into a sucking quagmire of debris. As disgusting as it was, she didn't have a choice. Here she could hunt for food, which remained her constant and number one priority. She made good time and finally traded dry open country for buzzing insects and creeping brambles. The path before her was overgrown, but she knew it like the back of her soiled hand. She'd already searched the rusty vestiges, the old world machines that had landed to die in the muck, their paint chipped and their metal rusted. Their only use anymore was as landmarks in her travels. When Oma happened up on them the first time, she'd been curious. She supposed people before the merge made the mechs to operate their cities and farms. Though those were beyond repair, she saw some machines reworked, most likely not for their original purposes, in different settlements further inland. Every piece of scrap in the desolate world seemed to be given an overhaul and repurposed. Some became weapons, and others were manipulated into creations, making the people's lives a hair more manageable in their post-war existence. Oma found many different uses for their parts. Much of what she found she traded away over the years. She kept the best items, which after some creative tinkering went into the traps she used to capture food. Oma smirked, glaring past the heat. She'd become damn good at surviving out there. Boastful? Why not? Nobody was around to feel bad about her thinking it, and she was still alive for a reason. Dusk took over the sky by the time she stepped from the gnarled bushes and solid ground into the first of the mangroves. The trees, hulking giants, grew like twisted weeds, taking over the landscape, adding to the darkness that shed its cloak over the world. Old-timers remembered when the growth wasn't like this. The marshes of the past were small and barren, a result of being culled back from civilization. Though their name stuck, the bramble trees she traversed were more than likely something else altogether, something mutated and probably dangerous. Oma wished life was more like the stories of the time before, when people had few cares and weren't always fighting to survive. Back then, food was abundant and hot water wasn't a luxury. She wiped annoyingly at the constant sweat forming on her brow and tied up her hair. Having grown tired of her flowing locks long and out of control, she considered chopping the curly mess off at her nape. She wanted to let the curls bunch on the top of her head. Unfortunately, stopping to deal with hair wasn't a priority. Satisfied with her location, she tugged off her pack and rummaged for a trap. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. My computer, I just noticed, is dying, and I need to get a drink of water. So this is going to be a two-part reading. So look at the video immediately following this one. And that will be the second part of this. I'll see you in a few.